Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I'm your host, Angela Wetzel with Epic Initiator Coaching. I coach attachment styles, relationships, that kind of thing. And this is also your host, Nick Carl. He is an experienced somatic experiencer. You can find him at the Safe Anchor and on Instagram, by the way. And today we thought we'd drop in, since we did a podcast way back when, all about anxious attachment, that we would come in and spend an episode talking about avoidant attachment, which I think is also endlessly fascinating. And it's kind of been a topic that I've been really interested in posting more. Usually I post more about anxious stuff, but I've been really into doing more avoidant stuff, because I think people that lean more anxious find themselves in partnership with people that lean more avoidant, and they like to learn more about those dynamics as well. So
Yeah,
it's a good topic.
right. I'd like for you to, and I think that we should do this anytime we do these like fundamental stuff. It's like kind of talk about the realm that we're in, right? We're talking about attachment stuff and about like how it's created, and then why it's important to learn about these things and how they manifest in the present. Why it's important that we have to like learn about it.
Yeah. So that's good. I like that. So attachment is all about like how we bond. And this is just something as humans, it's instinctual, it's primary, it's something that we actually do with everything. So our attachment style will overlay onto how we feel about possessions. If you've ever had like a favorite mug or something like sweater, and you like broke it or lost it, how you felt about that, because there was an attachment there.
Right.
Same thing with money, pets, friends.
Cars.
Cars, yeah, whatever.
Places
We
to
have
live, jobs.
ideas,
Yeah.
fantasies, dreams, goals. We attach to things. We attach to concepts. We attach to, art, movies. If you've ever had someone insult one of your favorite movies, how does that feel? Or an artist that you like, those are attachments.
Right. Yeah.
Politics. Did someone insult your favorite politician, your sports team, your whatever? These are all
Dare you.
these are all attachments,
Okay.
because we resonate, and then we find some reflection there, and we form our little tribes, right? So when you think about tribes and how we have evolved as humans, it's all about attachment. So based on that, so we'll go back into some of the fundamental things. So there are two primary attachment like camps. One is secure attachment, and the other is insecure attachment. So secure attachment, we all know, at least in some degree, but it means feeling a sense of interdependence, healthy interdependence, which means I can feel safe moving towards someone, and I can feel safe moving away from someone. I feel good when I'm alone.
Yeah. People are safe, that you feel good in your body, right? Being inside yourself, I think that's an important part. Being who you are is good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can you trust yourself, you trust other people. Relationships feel flowy and easy. Like it's easy to be by yourself. It's easy to be with others. Like you flow in and out of those states pretty naturally. Not a lot of worry or anxiety around there. Now, when it comes to insecure attachment, that's when you find your little umbrella of things under there, which would be anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. And then actually, technically, you would get the subcategory of I almost feel like I should have an image if I'm describing it this way, but I'll just continue. Disorganized and fearful avoidant. So we could look at those as like the four main types, overarching types of insecure attachment. And really, those are based on primary attachment fears. For the anxious, it's abandonment, rejection. Pretty much, if you're not in proximity to another human, you might die. You have trouble with self-regulating. So you naturally lean towards and want to reach out for someone else to help you soothe your nervous system and feel better, right? So being alone is a struggle. When people move away from you or in the absence of your partner, you'll feel anxiety. When it comes to the avoidant type, which we're talking about, that is a lot more complex. So obviously we're going to go more into it and we'll talk about the origins of those. But the main wounding underneath that is having trauma because of proximity to other humans. So the anxiety around that is actually an approach. When someone's coming towards you, when you have things moving towards you, it's a sense of overwhelm, it's too much, and it can feel like you have no protection, no boundaries, no self-identity, no power to keep something from taking you over, overwhelming you, engulfing you, swallowing you, all the above. It feels terrifying as well. And then disorganized is really a combination of anxious and avoidant. And then there's fearful avoidant, and some people will make the distinction, others won't. Fearful avoidant is really just disorganized, and I would say with the additional flavor of if you've ever had the kind of abuse where it's been like psychological intimidation, or you've been assaulted sexually or physically, something like that, where you've had bodily harm or threatened bodily harm in some way, whether or not it actually happened. I would put that in the fearful category, where you have trauma around being worried that you might be physically harmed. So it adds, I think, another layer of complexity to those other attachment styles. Did I cover kind of what you laid out? A really nice structure there. I don't know if I covered.
Ish. So it was, I think
What was the other thing you asked?
Well, part of it is like, it's like why it's what it is, right? So we're talking about bonds, right? Then you laid out sort of these four categories, and broadly speaking, it's like, and it's in relation to the bonds. It's like how you act, interact, and react to the bonds and how they're happening from moment to moment, right? And the secure person, wherever they are in relation to how the bond is going, it does not induce a movement inside themselves, either to get closer or to get farther away, right? So that's the secure part. It's like bonds to a securely attached person are safe places, right? It doesn't have hints of danger or threat or injury, past injury. Right?
Yeah, I would say it's just like feeling like you know where you stand with that person, whether you're with them or not.
Right. And then conversely, right, to somebody who's insecurely attached, the you don't know where you stand with them can kind of go to two poles, so that's what we were sort of talking about. And it's sort of broadly speaking, it's like when you don't feel good, what's your strategy to feel better, right? About how the bond is formed. And so the anxious people, it's like, oh, I need to get closer. I need to hold on. I need to like put in my hooks. I need to like, make sure, call you 1,000 times. Like, why isn't he calling me? That kind of stuff. So it's this inward movement of trying to get closer in proximity.
Yeah. Needing reassurance through presence.
Right. Where an avoidant person, when there is insecurity or like questions about the bond, or they're not sure, or that it has just come too close to them, there's a fundamental distrust of being bonded or being violated by bonding, by people close to them. And so that fires up a whole array of sort of symptoms, or ideas or ways that you see the world.
Yeah.
What I brought up first was like, so that's the territory. I think that's a good explanation of like your territory of.
Well, and the other thing quickly that I'll say before you go back into that is really the origins of all insecure attachment or attachment wounding is really trauma, is complex trauma. So when you're healing trauma, you're also healing your attachment style.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So next thing I was going to talk about is how it's formed, right? Like, what is it?
Yes.
Yeah. 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 And so trauma is what? What is trauma?
Trauma is, well, they say not the incident that happens to you, but it's what happens as a result of that incident, like inside of you. So there's a really great documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma with Dr. Gabor Mate. And that documentary gives a really comprehensive view of trauma and the origins of trauma. But really, it's, if you think about it, when we have something happen to us, our nervous system is always trying to navigate safety and survival. So when something happens to us that threatens our body or threatens us emotionally in some way, that our nervous system decides it's not sure if we can survive that. In the absence of being able to regulate or make sense of that, then we can have trauma as a result. So if you have something, if you have a very serious incident happen to you, but everything kind of works out and you're taken care of and you feel really good, is that going to leave a mark? You're going to be like, no, this thing happened. It was kind of scary, but then everything was so good. And I feel really I felt safe and I felt supported and surrounded and connected and loved. No trauma. But any aspect of that where you feel like this unknown thing happened, it was unpredictable and chaotic, and I don't know how to make sense of it, and I was having all these feelings, and it was so intense that I didn't know how to handle it, and no one was there, and I couldn't talk to anyone about my experience, or, especially when we're at a young age and we can't reach out to someone, or there's no one there that's attuned to our emotions, then we have these many pockets or incidents of trauma where we haven't really been able to make sense of something and prove to our bodies that we are safe or that we actually survived that thing. And then there are aspects of our personality that become hypervigilant and are always looking out for something like that to happen again,
Right.
which is an active trauma loop in our bodies.
Yeah.
And when we're in relationship, it's
so fast forward now, you have this active trauma loop in your body, this thing that's always looking out for this thing. How do people start to see that this is happening? I have an answer for this, but I'm interested in what you think.
Oh, you mean how people become aware that they have active trauma loops?
Right.
Yeah. So the number one way, well, there's two ways. One is when you get massively triggered by another person, but it's so obvious that the trigger that you're having is out of context. When you can tell that you're having a reaction that doesn't necessarily match the circumstances or the person, where you're like, oh, I just met them. Why am I having this reaction to it? Right.
Okay. And what's the second
That's
one?
usually one. The second one's in a repeating pattern. That's one of my favorites. When you've got patterns, you're just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to think if there's others, but sure, there's other clues.
So to me, that's the one that screamed the loudest, especially as I got older, right? It's first time, it's fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, that kind of thing. But it was
right.
Broadly speaking, I could see gosh, these are all kind of happening the exact same way, right? Almost the exact same way, the exact same pattern. And then by the fifth sort of substantial relationship to go the exact same way, it's oh boy.
Yeah, it's me.
Well, I didn't even think that. I just honestly, without having educational bits around it, I thought it was me, but the solution for that it's me is that I'm just fucked up. Right.
Oh, right. I'm totally fucked. I should just give up.
Right. It just doesn't work.
Right.
It just doesn't work.
Or sometimes when people have patterns, they view that as they view that as confirmation that, oh, this is the way the world is.
Right. This is just the
all men
world.
are cheaters, all
Yeah.
men do this, or all women are like this, or
Right.
this scenario is always going to happen to me
Uh-huh.
because I've seen it time and time again, right?
Right.
Like I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
And the tricky thing about those victims, like those cycles where we feel victimized by life or in relationships, is that we're such powerful creators that even like we're creating those self-fulfilling prophecies. So even in our victimization, that's how powerful we are. We
Yeah.
have the ability to either create or escape those victimization stories,
Right.
which we have another
Which, I mean,
podcast on.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and I think that goes in tune with this. But say if you would have said that to me like 5 years ago, it's like number one, that idea is just completely gobbledygook. Oh, I have power. I mean, like, it just doesn't have any context to live anywhere. It just doesn't. So like you saying that, it's like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sure, sure, sure. Yeah, I'm doing this to myself. I guess I'm doing it to myself. Oh.
Right, right. And well, again, like, and we had that other podcast about this, but it's not necessarily like, I'm trying to, so it was Michael Bernard Beckwith that talked about this. He talked about like the 4 different ways we, like attract things or like how situations happen. And one of them, of course, is that we're opting into it and that we are creating, these patterns from a wound, like unconsciously or subconscious is focused there on keeping that thing from happening again. Cause it's like, fuck that. This thing isn't going to happen again. So I'm going to, be hyper vigilant about it. But then there's just like other things, like there's things that you can't necessarily account for. And it's like to try to assert that, somebody asked to be like horrifically like maimed or this or that, like he kind of chalks that up to like maybe unexplainable things or even like choosing life paths or just different things like that. It's just like, it's not always helpful to be like, yes, I chose that. I wanted this thing to happen to me.
Hmm.
Because usually like with the patterns it's unconscious anyway, so it's not like we're consciously choosing these awful situations or this like drama that we find ourselves in. Like nobody really wants that. So I guess it's just kind of being open to say like, hey, what's here, I guess, more so.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think about basics are like curiosity and responsibility. That you have to.
Yeah.
It gets very tough, and I think especially with in the avoidant landscape, right? So this is
Yeah.
like my therapist or the guy my coach that I worked with for a long time talked about like in treating the two sort of sets, so the two like sort of polar, so opposites, that anxious people are highly motivated to like fix themselves because they do think that the
Yeah.
solution to their problems is being in bonding, is being in relationship, that they see and even if that golden carrot is sort of like parts of it are false anyway, right? Or the way that they have relationship to it is false. It does propel them forward into trying to figure it out, sometimes
Yeah.
desperately. And I can raise my hand and say, yes, I have.
Oh yeah, me too. Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Where
Highly motivated
where
to
like
fix that.
conversely, the other way around, it's like if you are wounded and traumatized and then came to like some strictly avoidant patterns in your wounding, then that wounding and that trauma kept you safe. And so that your relationship with the solution that you came up with is essentially going to be good. You're going to feel good about that, right? Like, yep, I got kept safe.
Right.
This is where I feel good. I feel good when I have these boundaries up and have this space between me and anybody else. Just the problem
Yeah.
with that is that it can preclude all of the juice and the magic and the creativity that is brought forth through intimacy and through being in connection with somebody, right? It is one of the the great benefits of being a human being is being connected to people and
Right.
being intimate with people, right? But if you believe somewhere deep in your heart of hearts, in your unconscious, that that's not a safe place, and then it's just going to be problematic.
Well, something that I'm sure you've noticed as well and that we've talked about is that with avoidance, I think it's really sneaky because you can really take those emotions at face value
Oh,
because they
absolutely.
tell you to move away, or the feelings that you're having is like, oh, I'm really not feeling anything for this person. Like it can feel like boredom, apathy, numbness, like being dissociated. It can also turn and be very critical. Like you can be nitpicking this person, and all of these strategies are helping you create distance, helping you separate and
Right.
actually separate from another person and create that distance. And there's a good reason why your nervous system is and your brain, like you're creating distance because it wasn't safe in the past to
Right.
have that closeness.
So the insidious part of that, well, I don't know, it's not insidious. So I did that. I did those things, right? I broke the good flow of connection in many a relationship, thinking and believing, and because I did believe that that is just me. That's just who I am. Because I am so one with these strategies that are built into my persona, right? That I just think
Mm-hmm.
that's who I am. There isn't anything else there. So if I'm going to do something different, I'm going to have to become a completely different person, which is that's kind of a strange place to be, you know?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you were in those relationships and you were feeling that avoidance, were there any anxious aspects that came up like in the relationship, or did you feel more avoidant? Because I know people always ask this like about relationships or how like avoidant people wind up in relationship. It's like, oh, well, how do they even find themselves in partnership at all if they're so avoidant? And it's like a super avoidant person probably will struggle in maintaining like basic relationships. Yes.
Right.
But everyone has these flavors. And I really believe that attachment is very dynamic. So,
Right. Well, it's so we talk about
yeah.
the combination of the sort of the two poles, right? So, which is disorganized. So it's like I do have anxious parts of me that are very interested in being in relationship, you know. So I sought them out. You know, I'm looking to get myself there. But then there's
Mm-hmm.
some Rubicon, right? There's some line in the sand that once we cross over into that, it's so funny because I watch my thoughts and I know exactly what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that eventually she is going to find out that I'm not a good person.
Mm.
That like that, you know, that whatever it like the ruse or whatever the spell or whatever the feelings that she's feeling are just going to change. And
And what is the bad person part?
bad person.
Yeah. Like, what is it? Is it like just certain like fears or things that you've done that you feel like if someone found out about those that you wouldn't be worthy
No,
or
I think it's more of like a just like a deep essence of like this person's not worth it, right? As in me.
so like some kind of shame?
Yes. Yes. Some kind of deep shame that like at the end of the day, when it's all added up, like it wasn't worth it. It would have been just better to not have done any of that.
But which is interesting because at the core of that is like abandonment.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it's really interesting to me that if you look at how anxious and avoidant, like how do I say this? I want to set it up this way. I want to say the anxious person, like we know that their wounds come from a feeling of abandonment. So usually an emotionally unavailable, unattuned parent, like a more avoidant parent or absent parent, creates, so there's like an energetic template. So they're observing this personality type, this avoidant type, and they're responding to it. Their nervous system is saying, I have needs, and this is how I get the needs. In my anxiousness, I'm motivated to move towards them, ask for things, have a sense of entitlement towards those needs getting met, even tantrums and, you know, all and the like. But also because they've witnessed this behavior and potentially that avoidant person rejecting them because of their emotions, punishing them because they're, too much. It's like that anxious person also creates internal avoidance. So it's like they also have the avoidant blueprint inside of them because they observed an avoidant person. They have both aspects inside.
Mm.
If you look at the law of polarity and how that works. So I see this a lot just in my work with how things like that show up. And it's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting to me how it's like I truly think that they're like two sides of the same coin.
Mm.
And it's just like you can flip back and forth, and it depends on the relationship and your orientation and, like, obviously your collective trauma
Mm-hmm.
around how you're going to show up and respond. But I do think the blueprint for both is in there
Mm-hmm.
based on those relationships.
Did you watch the
Yeah.
thing about the chimpanzees or some kind of monkey in the zoo, and then they forced these females to have babies, but then they didn't. They were raised in the zoo, so they had no enculturation as to how to raise babies. Have you seen this at all?
No, but I've
It,
heard of it, I think.
yeah. Anyway, it was just so the mothers rejected their babies right away and just like completely rejected them, and like for science, they would put the baby in proximity to the mother, even though the mother would shoo it away and like could kill this thing. The babies continually, always were motivated to go back to try to get the love that they needed, to try to get the nurturance that they needed from their mother figure.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that sort of pull into relationship, even though somebody who's, say, highly avoidant, right? That it's
Mm-hmm.
so fundamental, right? It's so fundamental that, like, I think there's always a type of pull or some kind of relationship to it somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, the and so that the pattern that we call my pattern is the disorganized, and so it's like into a certain point, and then past the point where it becomes very treacherous, right? This is like some liminal space that I don't have any faith in. Then I become very I become very I don't feel good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like so negative, it just becomes negative emotions, and then my brain like tries to make sense of the negative emotions that are happening. And mostly the way that I would do it is I start kind of like making lists. It's just like, oh, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't like this. Oh
Mm-hmm.
gosh, I don't like this. And I had done it so many times, and I figured out later that I kind of almost do it with every single person too, right? So I'll be making
What's
my.
my list, Nick? Do you have a list
Oh
for
yeah,
me?
it's fucking Bible, pages long, 1,000 pages. Just like making the list, but the list only really serves one function, and that's not like to like. It only serves as a function, as a fulcrum for me to exit the relationship when necessary, right? Or to be
So
mean
it's
or
kind
something.
of to be like a rap sheet for a person to be like, see, they're not good, or this is like pros is here, cons is here. They have more cons. So,
Yeah. Well, and especially in those kinds of instances, like, it's already like enough time has elapsed, right? Time has elapsed, so like the juiciness of the honeymoon phase is over, and now it's like getting into, and you can always kind of sense the trajectory of two people. It's like, are they moving? Are you getting closer, or is it sort of like, are you slowly drifting apart? And it's what are the forces that are sort of dictating that, right? So of course at the beginning when you don't know somebody, it's like, okay, you have maybe a lot of physical energy, you're spending a lot of time together, there is this great polarity that brings you together, but the internal
mm-hmm.
intimacy, that just takes time to sort of unfold. It's like it's on a long timeline. It's like anybody can talk a big game. It's like, well, okay, we'll hang around them for like 3 months or something, and you'll see if the big game is congruent with the type of person that they actually are, and all the 10 billion little micro interactions. You can start to see. So like somebody's persona can not match their actual internal creative emotional state. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you are
Yeah.
if you are avoidant or if you are anxious, if you're insecure with the world, then this is where it's all going to bleed out. And it starts to, it begins to communicate a lot more than maybe whatever your persona of your game or the, the lies that you've told yourself, they won't
Right.
hold.
Or also, yeah, it's like somebody like kind of bragging or putting their best foot forward or
Hmm.
showing, like, oh, this is me. And like, yes, talking a good game, but
Right.
it's important to like watch behaviors and to make sure that those line up consistently.
Right.
Because when you have like things that are off, then it's showing you
Right. It
like,
becomes
oh,
very clear. And like I've known people who presented themselves like really, really well. It seemed like they have all this stuff together, but then once intimacy, which comes through time, you say like, oh, like some behaviors like, holy shit, like what the fuck is all this, Like this person is, and you don't have any way to contextualize, it's like, holy fuck, there's like some serious shit going on here,
yeah,
which is, you know, that's what it is sometimes.
yeah. Something that I wanted to get into is like some of the origins of avoidance and where it comes from, because I think it's really helpful to understand. And I wrote this in a post the other day. I think it's really important to understand that people that have avoidant attachment style, like they're not out to get you. They're not out to ruin your life. They're not out to be an asshole or a bitch. Like they're really not trying to hurt you. It's really about them and their self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I had posted was like kind of the spectrum. And on one side, I had put like narcissistic wounding, and on the other side, I had put codependence. But you have to understand like it's a spectrum. And also, it's like those two things go together like peas and carrots as well, like peanut butter and jelly.
Right.
Because the codependent person is going to be attracted to that person that has more narcissistic wounding, because the codependent is all about the other person and making sure they're safe so that they can feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have that person that has narcissistic wounding, they can be really good at putting on a show and being charming and seeming like they have everything, together. But on the inside, they can feel really inadequate and they can have a lot of wounding to where they are very self-focused. And sometimes that can come across as like self-confidence, and they can seem very independent.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, those that people that have avoidant attachment style have had more narcissistic wounding. It does not mean that they're narcissist. It just means that the type of wounding can be deeper in a way that it's like those grooves are deeper. The trauma may be a little more challenging to heal around.
What is narcissistic wounding?
I would say it's like anything that, like at its origin, like the core is like deep, deep shame.
Okay.
And so it's almost like too painful to even really look at or access. So it's almost like trying to push that away and not feel it and not acknowledge it. But it's like there's so much intense pain there. They do a lot of different things to kind of like cover it up and deny it. So they can be very like projective, and everything is about other people, and they're very victimized and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's not to say that like anxiously attached people can't have that too, but it's just like the flavors are a little bit different. Like an anxious attachment person is going to make sure that they do what they need to do to like maintain that relationship. So generally it means a lot more self-sacrifice. And a person that's a little more avoidant, like they need that space to feel safe. So they
Right.
find other ways to get their needs met, find emotional relief. And that's usually about them being fiercely independent, not interdependent. They're more detached as opposed to hyper attached.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like the balance there is non attachment, which means non attachment isn't the same thing as detachment. It kind of means you're not needing to like grab onto something or like push it away. You're a lot more content with just like with what is, and like kind of allowing that flow state in your attachment. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So the whole yeah, like narcissistic thing, which is really a necessity, actually. So anytime you have like deep wounding, it's important, you know, like people can get kind of weird about this whole like victim energy or victimization, like, oh no, I don't want to be in that energy. But it is important, it's an important state for us to go to or be in. If we don't have the resources or tools, it actually means acknowledging that there's a wound or acknowledging there's something there that you need support with, or
Right.
that perhaps there is something like coming at you or hurting you and you don't have the skill set or the resources or support to defend against that or to make sense of it or for you to be okay. So it's
Right.
like every single, I believe every single emotion like has a purpose. Like there is not a single emotion that's like, oh, that's just a garbage emotion. It
Right.
can be easy to like want to be like, oh, this, you know, like something that had been said a lot is that like shame has no transformational value. But actually, shame was always has been like an evolutionary tool for like, you know, especially parents, but I think also in society. But like with children, if they're going to reach for something hot or they're going to hurt themselves, it's like that no. And when parents are like saying no, and the kid's like, what did I do? Like that feeling of shame actually causes them to stop and like identify what it is they're doing so they don't get into danger. But it was always meant to be like something that's also like repaired after that rupture. So it's like, oh no,
Right.
you're okay, you're fine. I just didn't want you to hurt yourself, kind of thing. So
Right. But a
it
lot of
was
times
meant
these
to be
things
used
are
as that tool.
installed in such like a drip, drab, day by day, in manner where it's just like this is just how it is, and then it's through your whole upbringing, and that's where it gets a little, I think, tricky because your deep identification with this coping mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets tricky because, yeah, victimization is a, it's victimization, victim energy, all that stuff like that. It's a coping mechanism. That's something that is really important for when you need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when it happens at such a young age and such a fundamental time when we're making these deep assumptions and understandings of how the world works, that's when it becomes so ingrained with us that we don't second guess it.
Right.
And you can't, uh, if you've understood the world to be a certain way, it's like I said, it has no context at all to say, like, actually, you have power in that domain. You have choice in that
Mm-hmm.
domain. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know?
Yeah.
That just
And
makes no sense whatsoever.
yeah, and like victimization, I think that energy like has a certain expiration date. It's like past a certain point, it's
Right.
like that wound like really stagnates, or it's like you no longer need to be in that protective stance, and then it's like you start to atrophy like spiritually.
Yeah. I always sort of thought that it
um
was like, it's like, for me, I could just see it as a pattern, but it's like mid 30s. I saw it, I'm sure it happens all over the timeline, but it like, for me, it's sort of, it crested in a bunch of different places, but it really sort of come to a head where essentially my body begins to break down from holding so much sort of pent up, unexpressed energy, that and it started to break a long time before. Like I started like, having gut issues probably 15 years ago or something,
mhm.
which is like a somatic representation of something that was going on. But I just dealt with it forever.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I don't think there's any kind of hard and fast rule of like when it starts to, you know, the state doesn't serve you, because I don't think it was serving me the entire time. It's just that I
Mm.
am I am forced into a confrontation with it because of how much it has affected my day to day life, my reality.
Mhm. Yes. The so I was talking about the origins of avoidance. Um and I'm trying to remember what I covered already, but there's a few, like, I'll go back over them. One is neglect.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're raised in an environment where you really don't have anyone around, then you don't know that you have someone that you can go to and lean on for support, then naturally you're going to be very independent and you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to ask for help. It's just not going to be one of your instincts, because
Right.
when you start to get the message that no one's there, no one's coming, there's no one available. Like, and I've seen this a lot, especially latchkey kids or kids that are raised by parents that have to work like two jobs, or, you know, both parents are out of the house. They're working all the time. Even though their kids may have a roof over their head, they may have, you know, the 3 square meals a day. They've got comfortable beds. They could even have things. They could have like
Mm.
games and a comfortable place and a security system and the whole thing. And if there's no adults present, they have no way of really regulating or
Mm-hmm.
getting that emotional support. And that is really going to affect them. And sometimes the older children will end up watching the younger children, and it's like children watching children. And that can cause a lot of trauma, especially, you know, things happen, like a lot of things can happen when it's just like kids watching each other. You know, kids get into all kinds of things. Anyway, so that's one. Another is, you know, kind of like I covered, when there is some extreme like emotional abuse or emotional shaming,
Sure.
that can cause someone to like shut down. And so it's like the relationship to one's emotions becomes complicated. It's like ruptured. And so that inner compass, like that connection to that inner compass, it's like, at its core, it like becomes shame. Like, my emotions are wrong. I'm bad for feeling. And then it causes that process of just dissociating or shutting down from those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And then anytime someone has overwhelming emotions, that those triggers come up again, and then you want to shut them down. Or
Mm-hmm.
when they happen in yourself, you want to shut them down. So
Right.
that can be avoidance there. Um, Also, when there's an enmeshed relationship, so a parentified relationship where, you know, your mom's like special little boy, or dad's, you know, special daughter, or whatever, in a situation where like maybe one parent's absent, or maybe again you end up like raising younger children. It's like you're thrust into more responsibility than you should at your age or developmentally like ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you can be exposed to certain adult situations or emotions that you're just really not ready to handle, or like certain adult circumstances. Like, if you have a parent that is emotionally venting to you and using you as support, it's like children are meant to emotionally regulate with a regulated adult. So in those situations, it's like a child is like, wait, I'm helping you. So, like, what does that mean for me if you don't have your shit together? Like,
Right.
what, you know, that can be really terrifying.
Right. Who can I trust now?
Um, right. And then, especially when those adults are talking about things that are developmentally beyond the years of that child, like maybe even talking like triangulation, like talking about the other parent, or even talking about sexual scenarios or anything like that, that can be really, really abusive, really devastating. And in many cases, like that kind of enmeshment where the parent is relying on the child, it's called emotional incest. I think for that reason, because it destroys their ability to trust, and it destroys the ability for there to be intimacy,
Hmm.
because it's just like having someone kind of like dump on you in a really intimate way.
Right.
It kind of it kind of crosses a boundary that you
Mm-hmm.
can't come back from.
Right.
So I would say those are some of the, yeah, those are some of like the main things. And when you think about avoidance, it's like, oh, and another one is just having, like I kind of mentioned with parentification, but it's like having an overwhelming amount of responsibility or pressure put onto you. So those children that have very strict parents, and they say like, you have to get this all perfect, you have to get this all right. It's like heaping that kind of responsibility and perfectionism onto a child. So children stars, prodigies, children that are made to like study and do all this stuff. It's like having so much responsibility put onto them to like learn so much and be perfect, and all of that can really cause that feeling of overwhelm and like I'm drowning, I have no choice kind of thing. So then the tendency would be to push away.
Right.
Yeah. So avoidance, yeah, that's largely where it comes from.
So why is it harder to coach, or why, how does coaching work with, or how does therapy work with somebody who's avoidant?
Well,
Are they
so
even going to
it's
come
in
to coaching? Are they going to come to therapy?
so someone that is really avoidant, like I've had a couple people come to me and say like, I think I'm more avoidant, you know. Generally speaking, it's because I don't think there's a person that can be like just 100% avoidant all the
Right.
time,
And I kind
because
of
like,
don't. I kind of don't think so either.
yeah, so like in connection, because I truly like, I personally believe that everyone's disorganized, like, because like attachment fears are like very basic, like with anxiousness, it's like what is it? It's not, sorry, I'll just go to the avoidant one. With avoidant, it's like approach anxiety. Like something's moving towards me, or like circumstances are coming at me fast and I feel overwhelmed. So it's approach anxiety. With the anxious type, it's like retreat anxiety, or like having someone leave you is like triggering that anxiety. And those two basic fears, I believe, is in every human being, like
Right.
managing our proximity to others and absence from others. Like we're always navigating those two
Right.
things, right? Those are like the main trauma, like origins of relational trauma.
Yeah, but still, like in everybody, and this is how it goes to everybody, is like still the deep relationship to bonding like exists. I don't think you can get away from that, right?
You really can't,
And
even,
the little monkey, like that you have a natural, like innate,
yes,
cellular level need,
yes, to
desire
bond,
to bond,
to
which is like,
attach,
yeah, which is like we've
right?
said it before, like it's like relationships are as important as breathing.
Right. So even, even the avoidant types, like they want relationship. They just want relationship without the feeling of pressure, without the feeling of obligation, without the feeling that someone's going to swallow them or
Right.
infringe on all their boundaries. Like they
Right.
want a relationship, but they
Where I
want,
don't disappear. Yeah.
right. Well, they want to have a sense of freedom in the relationship that they didn't get to feel as a child, like a
Right.
sense of being free and being self-sovereign and powerful in proximity to others, not suffering because of others,
Right.
like things being, heaped onto them. So
So what are some of the
they,
ways? What are some of the ways that you begin to address those things? Like, where do you go?
for the avoidance stuff,
Yeah.
I would say, I'm trying to think about it, because usually this is what I see when I work with people. And just to like finish my other thought is like, it's rare, but I have spoken to people, and usually they're coming to me because they're feeling overwhelmed, or they're feeling like kind of attacked by their partner and like made wrong for, taking space or not communicating, or whatever these things are, when they're literally running away to like get their space. Or there's addictions, like their coping strategies are usually process or substance addictions, because they're attaching to something else that isn't humans, because humans are very complicated. So
Right.
they'll have like pets, they'll have something not as complicated, usually a
Right.
cat, because it's not as as a dog, it's not
Right.
as like moving towards super energetic. And usually substances, multiple substances, micro addictions, different things like that,
Right.
you'll find an avoidance.
Macro addictions.
Yeah, like workaholic, gambling, porn addiction, all those things, because it's attaching to something that feels pleasurable, that's like giving them some sort of like satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't have to deal with the complication of humans. But so usually when I see people, what I'm seeing first is counter dependence. But really, by the time people are coming to see me, they're somewhere in this place between counterdependence and anxiousness, or usually they've hit a wave of anxiousness and they're like, I've never been anxious before. What is this? And it's usually that they've started out in counterdependence, which I would call an avoidant mask over anxiousness. So I'll
Give me an
explain that.
example of, yeah, counter dependence.
Yeah, counterdependence is kind of like I still have anxiety, but I may not really be allowing myself to register that based on like how much dissociation there is or how much numbing or suppression there is. But basically, if I like someone, I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to let them know. I'm going to like be very reserved in communicating how I feel because I don't want to give them power. I don't want them to have power over me. So, like, I may care about you, but like you'll never know. Like you'll never know how much you mean to me because if you did, then you would have this power over me and you might leave.
Right.
Right. Right. So it's like I would rather die than let you know how much I care, pretty much.
Sure.
And so it from that place, like it can really feel like you sort of have a handle on relationships because you can come across as more avoidant and then you have other people kind of chasing you and you can feel very powerful, like, haha, they don't know how much I like them. But
Right.
you know, and you may also not let yourself know how much you like them
Right.
either. Or you may stay away from relationships that feel too hot to handle. So you might actually pick partners that are not as enticing, not as triggering, like someone that you're not as attracted to. Just your nervous system, like your instincts kind of keeping you in a more powerful position because it's all about power dynamics.
Right.
So then once a person moves through that and they actually allow themselves to be more vulnerable and to really start feeling everything, they're going to start feeling the enormity or all of their anxiousness, and it's going to be big. And it's awful. It feels awful. It feels like dying. It feels like free falling. It feels like utter panic. It feels like not being able to sleep, eat. You can't do anything but focus on this person. It's being hypervigilant. It's awful. And then usually after we've worked through a lot of the anxious stuff, then we actually get to the really deep avoidant stuff, which to me is usually so much more damaging in some ways, which is why I've like said I believe it's more like coming from narcissistic wounds where it's like deep shame, like sexual trauma, like feeling like you're damaged or something wrong with you, like psychological intimidation, psychological abuse, gaslighting, just like things when you carry these deeper feelings of being wounded in proximity, it really causes you to like keep people away. And in the absence of that connection or letting people in, it can be hard to heal. So just some of those things are a little bit trickier, but it doesn't mean they can't be healed. It just means that it takes a little more time and tenderness and curiosity and like building that sense of trust with yourself and slowly building that sense of trust and relationship to go into those areas.
Right.
Which is interesting because a lot of people be like, oh, I'm anxious, like, oh, I'm not avoidant. But once they've played like both sides of it, or they might see like, oh, I acted this way in this relationship, I'm acting this way in another. But I think the other thing is that the avoidant attachment stuff is like so much more subtle it can be so much more subtle because it just seems like, well, I feel like moving away, or I feel like running away or hiding or not talking about this right now, or I'm shutting down emotionally, but that's all normal, even though it's not necessarily normal.
Yeah, I think the process of going in and building trust, deep emotional trust within yourself, I mean, that shit just takes time, right? Of exposing yourself to yourself, hopefully remaining in a loving place or developing a place where you remain open and loving to yourself and like caring and understanding, because it can be when it gets really hot, and it probably will, right? Part of the strategy or part of what you can think is like, why would I ever do that? I wouldn't ever want to feel that way again, whatever that is, which is like, that's the big guns that the internal things have. It's like, They're essentially
Yeah.
going to try to convince you that you're going to die,
Yeah.
that this is death. That, I mean,
This is it.
that is their trump card, which is the biggest one they have. But like, you know, if you do a big dose of psychedelic mushrooms, it's sort of the same way. The mushrooms will convince you you're going to die. Okay, why would I ever want to take mushrooms? It's because if you string it out, if you hang out and you go beyond that point, right, you get through the fear. That's where the gold lies, just past your fears, you know. And so there's this whole mechanism in place inside where that is trying to keep you away. But as you develop strength in being there and trust, and then these things start to come. So it's like part of the process, at least the way it worked for me, is like, you know, the can was very pressurized. You know, it was ready to burst open. So it starts to burst, but then it's just like you get through these layers upon layers of energy, and layers upon layers of like deep wounding or deep ways that I saw the world, you know. And some of them are like that. They're so spicy and so compressed that when they finally get expression and I'm able to see them, then it comes out like a fucking volcano. Which, I mean, probably the most terrifying experiences that I've had in my entire life were internal ones, of like actually meeting and seeing and being in the presence of some of these deep feelings, right? So it's like, but what's it worth, you know? Is it worth like clawing back big parts of your own soul and your own like, like sovereignty and your own grace, you know? I mean, that's the prize, right? That's the gold that you can get out of going in these directions, you know? But to say that it's a, you know, a gauntlet without any traps or foils or like, you know, damage or pain that you're going to have to like go through, like, unfortunately, like, no. It's like
Right.
all the things that were held back, all the things that were like not held or felt or had expression are still there waiting for you.
Yeah. And I think, you know, things that people can take for granted when they're entering into a coaching container is that really what they're doing is pushing up against their upper limits, which does require them moving through their fears.
Yeah.
And is massively uncomfortable to do that because your nervous system is going to be like, this means death. Like going past this point, you're going to die. And
Right.
there's a part of you that literally cannot see life beyond that line. And then it's like, once you survive that, it's like, wait, I survived this thing that I couldn't even imagine seeing on the other side of it. And then it's like doing it again and doing it again. And then like your exposure to that, it's like that great Pema Chodron quote. It's like, only to the extent which you expose yourself to annihilation can that which is within you, or that which is indestructible within you, be found.
Right.
And it's like really true. So it's like doing this deeper work is really not for the faint of heart. And something else that I've seen come up time and time again is, you know, something that I offer for my coaching for one-on-one clients is to do these complementary discovery sessions, because I can't just say yes to everyone that comes to my door. Like, that person has to be ready for coaching. They have to be coachable. There has to be a good fit. We have to like and enjoy each other's energy. Like, I need to like them. They need to like me. Like, there needs to be some kind of rapport between our energy. They need to feel a sense of safety with me. I have to feel like I can actually get them the results that they're looking for, because there's, you know, integrity there. And then even some people will avoid that coaching call because instead of just reaching out and getting the support and just being like, cool, we're going to see where this goes, right? Because usually, like, I would say most of the time it's two things, but usually it's like layered because there's fears, right?
Right.
One is, I'm afraid I'm uniquely fucked and there's no solution to me. And I'm hanging on by a thread of hope that there's like something here. Two, I like tried everything and nothing's worked. Like, I don't even know if healing is possible, right? Three is like, is this thing going to work for me? And maybe one of the biggest ones that I see a lot is like the investment. It's like, am I going to be able to afford this kind of thing? But usually when people are asking for pricing right up front, when it comes to these like coaching packages, what they're trying to figure out right away is they're trying to evaluate everything just based on a price without even like having the conversation for whatever reason. And it may be because they feel like if they show up for a conversation that they owe, they might owe me something, or they'll feel bad if they have to say, oh, I can't afford it, or, there's just like a number of fears that can come up. But
Sure.
that also points to avoidance. They're avoiding having the conversation. They're avoiding coming to that place or that crossroads where they actually make a decision. And they might actually decide, because if they knew the kind of transformation that was available, then they might say, it really doesn't matter what the price is, or, if I'm able to find a way to invest in it, I will, because it matters to me.
Right.
Because I know that I can trust in my own ability to like show up and do this thing. And, but anyway, there's like a lot of different things that are sort of merging there. But I have seen that with the more avoidant types, like they'll kind of try to opt out sooner. They'll kind of be like, oh, it's not for me, or it's not possible, or, I can't afford that, or I'm guessing it's going to be this much. And like, they don't even know exactly what it's going to be, but usually they just say, oh, it's probably going to be too much.
Right.
Yeah.
The insidious nature of like deeply held avoidant beliefs, it colors all the lenses so much that even taking in and really thinking about or contemplating any kind of situation doesn't get past all the, filters of possibilities of, injury, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which makes it tough.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if there's anything that we really didn't cover. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of things, but we've covered them in other podcasts. Like in the addictions one, we talk more about the addictive aspects, or the sex addictions,
Right.
which would cover a lot of avoidance stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but it is a really big topic.
Yeah, it's a giant topic, because the it's such a fundamental way to sort of picture and perceive the world, and it can be in margins of degree, but like if you follow it all the way back to like what the vector is, or what actually is the constituent energy of the thing, right? That's why like it bleeds into all directions, and they all go down into some place that is not easily like light switch accessible, right? There is a real story, there are real reasons, and there are like decisions or strategies that were employed that are the seed. Like there are reasons, right? The wild part is that sometimes they're not even in your life, Like these types of traumatic patterns can be passed through our family, which is like a whole other realm of like thinking.
Yeah.
That it's not necessarily just you and your family and your lifetime, That's how, like, that's the level of programming or sort of like understanding of how the world works that this exists in. But it is accessible, right? And that you can find out with time and attention and curiosity and compassion. I mean, that's it. And then with you, right, you're like the guidepost. It's like you're just like pointing the way, and then try to spend your time creatively into like pointing your consciousness into the right avenues, and then hanging out in places, and then asking questions in those spirits, And if you do that in earnest, there is things to be known, right?
Right. And it's really about leading people back to their selves, like their true selves, like the part of them that has really never been wounded. And it's like finding a relationship and a sense of trust with that part,
Right.
so that that part can start to lead, and they can start to like rely on themselves and have a system for how to navigate all of their triggers, whether they're anxious or avoidant.
Right.
And one of the, oh, go ahead.
And then start to practice going beyond their upper limits, right? So I'm reading the Gay Hendricks book, The Big Leap. They talk about the upper limits. We're practiced in our like energetic, like how much we can hold, and like how good we can feel, essentially. It's like a baseline that we set. we have to practice actually feeling good and like expanding that bubble. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
dude, I was doing it today, and like just he has this one particular mantra, and it's something like, I'm expanding in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire the people around me to do the same, right?
I like
Now,
it.
I just said it, and then this is part of the practice too. Was look for the resistance, and that was easy to find inside of me, and
As your
like,
body starts going, or your
like
guts, or your
there's,
thoughts.
I guess this is a counter-dependent part of me. Is just like, ugh, God, that's so gross. It's so stupid. It's just like, it's like, like, oh God, ugh. I was like, oh, cool, yeah. And then I started thinking about that reaction, right? This deep wounded place. And I was like, that's a kink. That's a little program that's set in my being that I have identified with for a long time. Like I have this thing where I just like see somebody or see thing and it's just like, oh God, what a dummy, or like, oh God, or like how gauche, like have no taste. This is so like, oh God. That it's a mechanism to hold down and break up the energy. That's like an upper limit, like keeper. It's like, don't feel good. Don't allow anything to come in that is maybe like soft or inspiring or like a good idea. Like we don't believe in that shit. And it's like, oh, okay. And so
Yeah.
for like the first time, I said some words to myself in effect in that energy, and I was like, oh, I have to let you go, bro. Like that part of me, I mean, thanks for being there, right? You got me through a lot of shit, bro. But now I'm ready for something more. And that something more is like I want to expand like these ideas, like ideas abundance, success, and love, right? If you find that gross, but I want that thing, you gotta go.
Right.
Dude. I mean, like you
Right.
can find another
Or
role, but this stance,
yeah.
this
Yes,
stance is
has to go.
unsustainable now. And so I set him aside, right? I set him aside for a moment. Then I searched for a good feeling in my body, which I was sort of able to feel, and then I just hung out there, right? But it's still, so that's part of the practice now. Is like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. The other thing that I was going to talk about was like commitment
Commitment.
and emotional availability. So when we're looking at avoidance, it's important to look at commitment, because it's like investing your energy in something and like staying there. And the avoidant person is going to be like, I don't know if I want to stay here. Like, I don't know if I can commit to this, because I think there's a thought that if I commit to this, I'm stuck here forever. So anytime you kind of feel that feeling like around any kind of commitment, you can suspect that there's avoidant attachment stuff going on there. Yeah. It's like, because when you look at the timeline of relationships, like you were kind of talking about this avoidant thing coming up, like past like a certain point, you're like, it gets past a certain point, and everyone's nervous system has a different threshold for what it's able to deal with. And it's no different. I mean, it's, yeah. And it's this way for avoidance. So when you have those early relationships and you've got all the hormones and all that going on, and it's kind of low risk and low challenge, it's like fun times. There's not a lot of emotional investment, not necessarily like a lot of huge like life events to navigate. But as you spend more time with someone, your nervous system's like, you're going to trigger each other. There's going to be more emotional things. And if you have an anxious person that's paired up with an avoidant person, they're going to trigger the hell out of each other, which is like, they're attracted to each other because that wounded polarity exists. Like you can attract someone from your wounds as well as attract someone from your healed places too. Like your gifts, you can attract people that way. And so like when you hit these different points in your life, like landmarks, it's like there's more commitment and more investment needed as you kind of get in deeper and you are expanding your capacity to really hold things, like hold relationships. Now you're buying a house together and you're investing in this property. And
Right.
now you're like investing in this business. And now you're having children and now you're getting pets. And it's like, at what point without support is your nervous system going to be like, I've had enough of this shit, like I'm
Right.
overwhelmed, it's too much responsibility, right? And it's, I think, a deep-seated fear of failure and disappointment, and then ultimately like shame and then rejection. Like at your lowest moment of shame, it's like rejection from that place. And there was this attachment person, what is her name? Brianna something, Mick something. I have to look it up. But she was talking about how, and it's really smart. She's talking about how like each attachment style, it's kind of like they present in a certain way. Like anxiousness, they'll be like, oh, my deepest fear is actually abandonment, right? But she says if you just go one step further, it's like the anxious person, like their deepest fear is actually being enmeshed and like losing their sense of identity. Like if you
Whoa.
go beyond their fear of abandonment, if you go further to like that core, it's almost,
Yeah.
oh, I'm trying to like explain this in the way that she does because I think it's pretty brilliant. But it's almost like just like we did with the avoidant attachment. If you really look at it, is it really just, do they really fear that
Enmeshment? No.
enmeshment, or is it when you follow that fear all the way down? Is it really showing you that it's actually rejection from not being worthy or not, like you said,
Right.
they're gonna figure out I'm not good, right? So it's just really interesting. Yeah, but I kind
Word.
of think that might
That's
be
it?
it. I think so.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Number 21 in the
So,
books. So Emotional Podcast. Angela, thanks for showing up.
yeah, thanks for showing up as well, Nick. We did not avoid this podcast.
No, we did it. We'll be
That was a
back
really
next
bad
week.
joke.
Same bat
Sorry.
time, same bat channel. So Emotional? Say hi to us? No.
Leave a comment. Oh, we don't have any reviews yet. You could be the first to review our podcast.
I left a review. I looked at it the other day. I left. Well, no, I just
You left a review?
No.
For us? You're like, I like this podcast. I give it 2 thumbs up. It's great.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to have this conversation here. Should we change the format? Do we need to like work on getting a bigger audience, or we just keep going in perpetuity?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Because
Oh, we can talk about this offline, but I guess if anyone has thoughts, shoot us. Shoot us a comment or email us at the soemotionalpodcast.com. But I don't know. I mean, we're just kind of getting started. I'm sure like
that
things are going to
URL
change
actually
or the
doesn't
format.
exist. So
Oh, I didn't mean .com. I meant, yeah. I'm sorry. I meant the soemotionalpodcast at gmail.com.
yeah, or
That's
just
what I meant.
leave
You
a
can
comment or
email.
something. You can also
or you
DM
can
us.
leave a comment.
DM us on Instagram or
Instagram.
whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for hanging out, Angela. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, out.